presenters Kristin Judge, and her topic is Cybercrime and Online Fraud, Resources for Veterans. Kristin's the CEO and president at the Cybercrime Support Network. She previously was elected to serve as a Washtenaw County Commissioner in 2008, supported the Department of Homeland Security and cybersecurity outreach to state and local government. After her term in elected office, she worked at the Center for Internet Security, focusing on connecting state and local governments to federal services and technology for improving cybersecurity. As the Director of Government Affairs at the National Cybersecurity Alliance, she worked with numerous organizations, congressional leaders, and other stakeholders to educate consumers and businesses on how to protect sensitive data. And again, the topic today is Cybercrime and Online Fraud, Resources for Veterans. Thank you for joining us, Kristin.
Great, thank you so much for having me, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to share a little bit about who we are and then share some resources with you and some best practices that either you can add to your own security or share with others. So as a nonprofit 501c3, our entire mission is to serve individuals and small businesses that are impacted by cybercrime. And we know that the military and veteran community can sometimes be disproportionately targeted. And so we want to make sure that we're finding resources specifically for your community. So we started the company for two reasons. We wanted to solve two problems. Number one, there are millions of Americans being impacted by cybercrime every year, but they really just don't know where to go to get started for help. And then we haven't counted the victims because they don't know where to go to get help and report. The reporting is really underdone. And so we don't really know the true cost of cybercrime. And I think Congress needs to be able to see how many people are affected and what it's costing our economy before they can act to make some solutions. I share this slide because I like to give you an idea of the magnitude of the problem we're looking at. So in 2019, 450,000 people, they went to the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center and they filled out a form that said they had been a victim of cybercrime. So 450,000 people. Of those 450,000 people, they lost $3.5 billion with a B. So if you just think about that, that wasn't a lot of people. I live in Washtenaw County, Michigan. We have about 400,000 people in my county. And of those 400,000 people, $3.5 billion in losses is a lot of money. So if we look at the fact that potentially 1 in 4 Americans is a victim of cybercrime every year, and we use those kinds of numbers in that last slide, we could have 50 million victims a year, and they could be losing over $300 billion a year. This isn't just an issue for an individual. This is an issue for our entire economy. I would say that, having $338 billion of consumers' money go to other countries and to criminals across the world every year is probably impacting our small businesses, our city sales tax, our restaurants and our grocery stores, our salons, because people don't have that money in their pocket to spend in their communities. Some of the key cyber threats that we need to talk about today and really make sure that we're talking out loud with our friends and our family about them, because what we're finding with cybercrime victims, a lot of times there's a lot of shame involved, a lot of self-blaming, and a lot of blaming coming from the outside. People saying, well, you just shouldn't have clicked on that, or you should have known better that that wasn't a real person. But the criminals are really, really good at convincing you that they are who they want you to think they are. So we have to be really careful not to do victim blaming, and instead to talk about cybercrime and the victimization of people in an open manner so that people will be more willing to come out and talk to others. That's how we're going to teach everyone that it's okay, and we can talk about the prevention then. So today I want to talk about phishing, cyber stalking, and these other items here. Phishing, number one, I see a lot of different reports, and it can go anywhere from 90% of all attacks that are happening right now start with a phishing email. Basically what a phishing email is, someone sends you an email that looks really good and you end up clicking on something and giving them access to your computer, or you end up giving them personal information. Cyber stalking, we are getting a lot more calls and information coming from victims that say someone is stalking them and they've broken into their computer, their phone, sometimes even their IoT devices in their homes. So it's really interesting that is somewhat on an uptick right now. and there are not a lot of resources. Tax and ID fraud for veterans and military families certainly are something to be paying attention to. There are a lot of resources, especially the Identity Theft Resource Center, who can help anyone who's been a victim of ID theft. Ransomware is growing. I'm sure you're hearing in the papers, cities are being held for ransom, their data, excuse me, not the city, but the data of cities and schools and organizations. Sometimes even individuals are being held for ransom. Basically what the bad guy does is they come in and they send you a phishing email, you end up clicking on it, your computer gets infected, and then they lock you out of your accounts until you pay them money. The only way really to combat this is to have a good backup. If you have a backup and you can access that backup and it's clean, and someone says to you, give me money or I won't unlock your accounts, if you have a good backup, then that's okay. You can just go to your good backup. But in some ways, they may still have your data and they may be able to then sell it on the dark web or use it in nefarious purposes. So that is something that we are seeing really grow. And I came up with this light bulb idea. I guess, you know, the rest of the world probably already saw this, but to me, in working with victims and trying to figure out how do we stop cybercrime, I had this epiphany the other week where I thought, we have to make it so cybercrime is not profitable. And ransomware is a really profitable business to be in right now. So somehow we've got to make sure that the criminals cannot make money off of ransomware. And so the FBI suggests you don't pay it, but if you're a small dentist's office or a small business and the only way you can keep your doors open is to get access to that data, you may be tempted to pay. Social engineering and imposter scams, romance scams are also going up exponentially right now during COVID times. People are isolated and looking for love online, and the criminals know that. So they're proposing to be someone that they're not, and then asking for financial help from the person that they so-called love. In 2019 alone, $475 million was lost to romance scams. And I want to put a point out that AARP saw that 11% of adults had been victimized themselves or know someone who was by a romance scam. That's probably really low because this is one of the scams that people are most embarrassed to talk about. So it's really important that we let people in our lives know that if they're doing online dating, it's okay to check up on the person who says that they are in love with them. And many times the criminals will use military pictures of military leadership and generals, colonels, and people that have already served. And there was one colonel who his picture was used in fake Facebook accounts 3,000 times, trying to get people to fall in love with him and give money to the criminals. So he was able to hopefully, you know, get some of his identity back, but it was used over 3,000 times. So it's important that we talk to people. So I want to give you some things that you can do today. Right now, one of the things that is under everybody's control, doesn't matter how good you are at security, and something you should be telling all of your friends, is to not overshare online. Remember that I said that 90% of the people that are being hacked in some ways, it's coming in through phishing emails. So how can I phish you very well and make sure you actually click on something? If I can go online, I can find out what you like to eat, restaurants you like to go to, do you work out, are you on a baseball team, do you follow certain nonprofits that you care about? I can probably send you an email just by looking at your online profiles on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever you may post things. I might be able to send you an email that sounds pretty convincing because I know enough about your personal life that you've put out there. Do you have your kids or your grandkids' pictures out there, whatever it may be, but you want to try and limit what you share. Excuse me, I'm fighting a little cold today. You might want to limit what you share so that people can't come up with a really good reason for you to interact with them. Now I'm going to talk to you about 6 steps that you can take right now. These are all things that you can do for free or almost free to make sure that your accounts are secure. And if you are someone who already works in security and technology, what I want to encourage you to think of during this talk is, here's information I can give to the people in my life that call me all the time because I have the word IT or security in my title at work. So think about that too. So please share this information. We make everything at Cybercrime Support Network so that it can be shared with others. So two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is so important that Microsoft actually did a study and looking at 300 million fraudulent sign-in attempts on their Microsoft Cloud services, they stopped 99.9% of them with multi-factor authentication. So number one thing you have to do is use two-factor authentication. If anybody doesn't know what that is, it's when you log into your account, you get either a text message or a code sent somewhere else that only you have at that time, and then you can get into your account. So if someone steals your password, they can't get into your account unless they have that extra code that gets sent only to you. And if someone is not sure how to add two-factor authentication to their account, again, if you are a security professional and you already know how, but you want to teach other people a simple way and give them resources, you can take them to this amazing website called TwoFactorOfforg. I had the honor of meeting the 22-year-old genius who created this site years ago when he was at Iowa State University. He was looking for a blog that he wanted to start using, a blog platform, but he wanted one that had two-factor authentication on it because he knew that that was something secure, and this is 6-7 years ago. But so he went online onto Google and said, all right, where's the list of all the sites that have two-factor authentication? And he didn't find a list. So he spent all day creating this site that can be populated by anybody who has information. So it's a share site. And if you want to look and see, how do I figure out what social media I have that does it have two-factor authentication? And then how can I add it? So I clicked on the button social. This would be the next page that comes up. And in alphabetical order, you'll see all of the websites that have two-factor authentication, or if they don't have two-factor authentication, like you see here with Flipboard, it'll say, tell them to support 2FA. And you can press that Twitter button and it will send a message to the company on Twitter, giving them a nice little nudge saying, we hope you can add two-factor authentication. But if you use Instagram, for example, you can see that Instagram does have two-factor authentication. They have the text message SMS, and they also have a software token. And if you click on the blue button that's right next to Instagram called Docs, it will take you directly to the page that shows you how to do two-factor authentication on Instagram. It'll do this for Facebook. It'll do it for different emails, all kinds of accounts, as you saw on that first slide. So if you are trying to help someone be more secure, one of the first things you should do is add two-factor authentication to their accounts. And by using TwoFactorOfforg, anybody can follow those quick, easy steps. It takes about 30 seconds per account. And because romance scams are such an issue right now, and so many military and veterans are being used, their pictures are being used in scams to take advantage of people, I wanted to share with you the reverse image search. So if you click on that camera on Google, it'll take you to a reverse image search tool, and you can upload a file there. And then what they'll look and see is if that file is in other profiles. So the gentleman I told you about earlier, he saw his picture on the profile of 3,000 different Facebook accounts pretending to be other people with different names, whoever it may be. But you can check and see if someone is legitimately who they are by checking a profile picture. Really good tool to have, especially if you have someone in your life who you think is being manipulated in a romance scam, but many times they won't listen to the people in their life, and you may just have to show them that the person isn't legitimate. So avoid phishing attempts and use unique passwords are the next two best steps that you can take to stay safe. And here is our password problem. If you are already in security, you know that this is a problem, and we pull our hair out every day trying to get people to use better passwords. But unfortunately, passwords can be stolen. Even if you have the best password ever and someone steals it, you can have two-factor authentication on your account and they still can't get in. So passwords eventually, hopefully, will start to fade away and we won't use them anymore. There'll be other ways to authenticate. There's a couple sites I go to now I never got a password for, which I thought was really interesting. Instead, every time I go to log in, They ask for my email address, and they just send me a code to my email automatically. They never asked me to come up with a password. So companies are starting to get the idea that passwords don't necessarily work. But this is the reason. Look at that top password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the people who think they're really, really smart and going to outsmart the bad guys, they say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But those all can be cracked within less than a millisecond. So these are not the best passwords. If you have those on any of your accounts, please spend some time this weekend fixing that. This is a great resource. I've done this resource with my entire family, my parents, my in-laws, excuse me, my nieces and nephews. You go to the site, haveibeenpwned.com, and you can put in your email address, and it will show you if your email address has been a part of any of the huge breaches that we've had out there. Yahoo had a breach of 100 million different emails and so on. So I also sign up for the notify me. You can see that button at the top there. So I give them my email address, and anytime my email shows up in a new breach, if I haven't taken the time to come look at this website, then they will send me an email saying, hey, you were just involved in another breach. And when I do put my email in, this is what comes up on the next page. So if I went into Have I Been Pwned, I put in my email, it tells me here, I've been a part of, there were definitely more than 3, so I'll show you, I can only fit 3 here. I was a part of the Evite breach that happened in April of 2019. 101 users' email addresses were stolen. And then it tells me here what other information was potentially compromised. My physical address, email addresses. I probably didn't put my physical address in there because I wasn't having a party on Evite, but maybe I was saying, yes, I'd like to come to someone else's party. GateHub and House also had attacks that my email address was a part of. So what that tells me to do is go change my password and clean that up. You have to consider your mobile devices are just a computer in your pocket, and then use security trusted tools that are available from the organizations that you use their emails, their software. There are security tools that you can go in and check your security on Facebook and Gmail and Microsoft. So look for security tools and tips on the actual platforms. If you do have to use public Wi-Fi, I know a lot of us aren't traveling right now or sitting in our favorite coffee shop, but if you do use public Wi-Fi, I was in hotels at least 3 nights a week before COVID hit, and I would use a virtual private network to access public Wi-Fi. If you can freely log on to public Wi-Fi, so can the criminals. So it's important to put yourself in a closed box, and that's where a VPN can come into play. Another suggestion, I say that you should sit down with the people in your life, sit down with your veteran friends, your military friends, your family, and others, younger people, older people, it doesn't matter. A lot of people don't look at their privacy settings. And sometimes when there are updates in iOS or Android or Facebook, the privacy settings can sometimes reset and go back to where they were before. So, do you really want the Neapolitan Pizza Company to have access to your camera? Well, probably not. And then you have to think about also your microphone apps, voice recognition, your location. And if you have younger people in your life, Snapchat now has a live map that shows exactly where you are. Sometimes if you post something to Instagram, it'll show your exact location and the time you took the picture. Do you really want the public to see where you are right now? And young people will say, well, I only have 200 friends on my Snapchat. Well, those 200 friends could be not people that you are getting along with all the time, and they could also just show it to someone else that doesn't like you, or maybe one that's caused harm. So it's really important to check your privacy settings and turn off location services. The only thing I think location services is important for is Find My iPhone or Find My Android. We use that in our family to help keep an eye on each other if we're traveling or if we need anything. So education is key, and you have a lot of resources out there. You are not alone in this at all. So we started CSN to figure out, where do I send people? Where can they go to start? After I've been a victim, what do I do? Who do I call? And here's an example of so many great resources that are available. But if you're the typical victim, you don't really know which one of these do I call? When do I call them? Who's going to give me what kind of information? So we wanted to really simplify that for people. We did some research and found out that 911 centers get a lot of phone calls from cybercrime victims. This is not a made-up tweet. People did call the Philadelphia 911 when their YouTube was down. And I've seen one for LA County when someone's Facebook was down. It may seem like an emergency to you, but 911 is not the best place to go. So we created FraudSupport.org to help people find what they need to report, recover from an incident, and then reinforce their security so they aren't re-victimized. And you'll notice on here, when you go to FraudSupport.org and you're a small business, you can click on the first bucket. If you're an individual, you can click on the second one. And then we created special programs down at the bottom. You'll see children, teens, and adults and their caregivers, older adults, and then military personnel and families. And we did this in the beginning with just, making extra resources, pulling them all together. And now we're very fortunate. We've gotten a fund, a gift from Craig Newmark, who is the founder of Craigslist. He's no longer there, but he is a philanthropist. And he just gave us a gift to build out a military and veterans campaign that helps to talk to the community about how to secure their devices and their accounts and what to do if they've been a victim. So be on the lookout for that. We are very excited to have that coming out, probably sometime early next year. So if you click on I'm an individual, you'll see there's 5 different categories that you could click on. If you click on financial purchase scams, those are really going up a lot right now. It'll tell you how to report, recover, reinforce, and take you to different types of scams, because depending on what happened to you, the resources might be different. But we put all of the resources into one place for you. And if you clicked on the military button right now, as it stands, you can find some preventative measures for military personnel and their families. And then you can also find specific cybercrime resources for veterans and families. So take a look at FraudSupport.org and click on that special military button there. We have found as many as we can right now as far as resources, but just know that there's going to be a larger campaign with many more resources being shared with organizations all around the country starting the beginning of next year. If you live in New Jersey, North Carolina, Rhode Island, Mississippi, Central Florida, or West Michigan, right now you can call 211 in your community to be served, and someone will answer the phone at the local United Way there and help you find the resources that you need, walk you through the reporting and through fraud support if necessary. So I like to show this because it's really important to point out that 50% of the people that are calling 211 in these states, they have financial purchase scams and imposter scams, like the romance scam, grandparent scam, someone pretending to be from the unemployment office or pretending to be from a command or a VFW or something like that. Those really are the #1 scams that we're seeing. If you believe someone in your life is a victim of scam or is thinking about giving money to someone, and you really need to show them that what's happening to them is not okay, we created Scamspotter.org with Google, and we're so excited. We've had over 50,000 people a month come visit this since we launched it in early June. And it tells you 3 golden rules. Slow down, because most of the criminals will send you an urgent message that you have to, answer right away. And then spot check. Look up the bank, look up the agency, or whoever is supposedly calling you or supposedly sending you something, and make sure it's really them. And then don't send gift cards. Gift cards are never a form of payment. They are just meant to be gifts. In general, don't send money to someone you don't know. And if your phone rings and you don't recognize who's calling, just don't answer it. If it's really someone who knows you and wants to talk to you, they'll leave you a message. We have a great YouTube channel under Cybercrime Support Network. Carissa from our team creates these great 1-minute videos on what to do if you've been hacked in some different ways. There's all kinds of great resources on there. And then on FraudSupport.org, on our resource library, you can see some of the posters and rack cards we have here. Some of those you can order for free, and we'll mail them out to you, and you can share them with your community. Here's a list of our websites, our YouTube, Twitter. We're also on Facebook. Those are the only social medias that we're on right now. I'm happy to reach out and chat with people if you want to reach out to me on my LinkedIn. And I think we have a few questions. Tom, did you want me to take a look at those?
Yeah, I'll read them off here for you, Kristen. The first
Sure.
one is from Ian Murphy, and I think it's going back more towards the ransomware. He says if you don't pay and the data is posted online, then regulators will hit you. So how do you get the FBI and regulators on the same page to protect companies?
Yeah, and that's something that I've been working with FBI, DHS, Federal Trade Commission, and trying to bring that voice of the victims to them and advocate for them, advocate for people who are impacted. And there are some potential laws going out right now that would put even more pressure on the businesses if they do pay Bitcoin. This one law that's circulating would say that they were now actually a part of, international criminal wiring of money. So we have a lot of work to do there. And I think part of it is we have to make sure that our congressional leaders understand what each of these agencies is doing. So we advocate for those kinds of issues all the time.
Gotcha. And I think this goes back in point with what you just said. His second follow on was, should we have mandatory breach reporting to stop companies from hiding payments to those cyber criminals?
So we do have some mandatory breach reporting, but it's done state by state. So depending on what state you live in, if two people have their information stolen in Arizona, I think it is, you have to report to the state. But there's also laws that through the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, I believe it was, that the former president did. It allowed companies to share with the Department of Homeland Security some threats that they were impacted by, and their liability was cut. There was no liability as long as you let DHS know what was happening and they could help you. You were not liable. So there are channels to report and not be liable, but the public just doesn't know about them, and we need a little bit more clarity.
Gotcha. If anybody else has any questions, please throw them in the chat right now.
I see Dave. Oh, Dave sent me a question. So Dave, reach out to me, please, on LinkedIn. He wants to see how he can help out. And I believe he's actually with the company Comcast, maybe, or no, maybe that's just his email. But we have a lot of private sector companies that are helping us. So please reach out on my LinkedIn if you want to help with our effort that's coming up. We'd love to have some champions that are out there on social media that can post things for us and support Ursula on our team. So love to talk to you.
Great. Kristen, thank you so much for coming by. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate everyone's service.